Hello and a very warm welcome to another edition of World Panorama. Like always, get ready to catch up on the biggest international news of the week. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get you detailed reports now, here's a look at the top stories this week. China enters into a tussle with the US, Japan and South Korea as it attempts to control airspace over disputed islands in the East China Sea. Thailand's Yingluck Shinawatra easily survives no confidence vote but struggles to find a way out of the crisis. In Pakistan, General Raheel Sharif takes over charge from General Ashfaq Kayani as the new army chief. And Brazil is under fire for World Cup mishaps. In a fresh accident, 2 people die when a giant crane came crashing down at the stadium. Our top story now. A row about disputed islands between China and Japan has raised tensions in East Asia. In the latest development, China has demarcated an air defense identification zone which includes the islands called Senkaku in Japan and Diaoyu in China, prompting protests from Japan and the US. Now, its establishment has caused widespread anger, with the US calling it a destabilizing attempt to alter the status quo in the region. The drama began over the weekend when the Chinese Defense Ministry warned that any non-commercial aircraft entering what it identified as ADIZ or the ADIZ would need to submit flight plans in advance and maintain radio contact with Chinese authorities or else face unspecified defensive emergency measures. Now, Japan and the United States immediately protested the move, with Washington calling it a destabilizing attempt to alter the status quo. And shortly thereafter, the B-52 bombers took off from an airbase in Guam to signal to Beijing that the US will not cede from a region where it has treaty allies it is bound to defend, with most of whom China has territorial disputes with. Let's discuss the recent developments and get an expert perspective. Joining me in the studio this week is Dr. Srikanth Kondapalli, Professor in Chinese Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Thanks so much, sir, for joining me on World Panorama. But before that, here's a look at this detailed report.
A Cold War involving new players is brewing in the waters of the East China Sea. It all began after the United States flew 2 unarmed B-52 bombers over a small island chain claimed by both China and Japan. US officials made it clear that the flights were intended to call Beijing's bluff and that Washington, which has a defense treaty with Japan, would not be browbeaten by a newly assertive China. Soon, allies South Korea and Japan followed suit.
但是我的理解是，那么在东海防空识别区中国的军队它有权来依据国际法并且根据中国防空的需要来进行航行。
China recently had announced that foreign aircraft passing through its new air defense zone, including passenger planes, would have to identify themselves to Chinese authorities.
今後ですね、政府としては、従来通りの対応する中で、今後もですね、その現行通り警戒、警備等の要領を変更するものはないということですね。従来通りということです。
그 사항은 지금 검토 중인 사항이기 때문에 말씀드리기가 제한이 됩니다. 다만 우리 대한민국의 국익 보호와 또 자주적 방위권 확보에 충분한 그런 범위까지를 검토할 것이고.
Japan established its own ADIZ in 1969. Therefore, it has no right at all to make irresponsible remarks on China's ADIZ in the East China Sea. State-run Xinhua agency quoted Yang as saying, China claimed that besides the US and Japan, 18 other nations have such security zones beyond their coastal waters.
今後も中国への配慮のためにこれを変更宣言するつもりは一切なくですね。 この点については今まで申し上げてきた通りであります。
In recent days, the US, South Korea and Japan have carried out air patrols through the zone without notifying China, making it clear that they will not comply with Beijing's measures. The three countries have expressed concern that the move may raise the likelihood of confrontations. China has found itself facing a delicate balancing act as it grapples with regional anxieties on the one hand and on the other domestic pressure to not appear weak.
All right, Dr. Kondapalli, do you think this China's action has set off a huge complication in East Asia, in that zone, which is already quite disputed? There's a huge dispute between China and Japan already over some of the islands in that area.
Japan declared the ADIZ in 1969, and today the Chinese woke up to suggest that they also have some kind of hold over this region. I think this is a kind of escalation that they have done. There is a contest between China, Japan and the US in this region, and the ADIZ is basically a contest for power in this region. If China has to rise, it has to control these regions. And when President Xi Jinping told the Washington Post earlier this year in February that they have enough space in the Pacific Ocean. So I think this is an effort, a linchpin in terms of transition towards the Pacific region. So China wants to control this region so that they can graduate towards the Pacific and then control the larger airspace there. So this is a contest that is emerging between US and China and Japan and South Korea.
And with this, do you think that China's displeasure of the US pivot to Asia Pacific, it's all more visible now with this particular act?
This is one of the aspects in that displeasure, but actually the US rebalancing announced in Obama 1 administration, it also included constructive cooperative partnership with China. So it doesn't rule out, officially it doesn't rule out any cooperation with China in this regard. Although US rebalancing would have strengthened further the US leadership in this region. So the rebalancing also has China as a factor and in a cooperative manner.
How do you see developments moving forward from here? What do you see China's strategic objective with this particular move? Do you think it's directed towards the US, or do you think it's directed more towards Japan right now?
Tactically, it is towards the Japanese and the South Koreans, but actually strategically they are contesting for the leadership position. By announcing the ADIZ, they are actually questioning the US leadership in the region. Although they suggested in September, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, for instance, spoke in the Brookings Institution in Washington DC, where he said there will be strategic rebalancing with the United States after the new type of major power relations were announced between Xi Jinping and Obama in June this year. So they are trying to kind of restructure the US-China relations, but with the suggestion that US should accept China as the emerging power and contesting for the US leadership.
And do you think the US is geared up to deal with this kind of a situation right now, with President Obama already being caught up with so many other things? Because US has vowed time and again to back Japan in whatever case it might be. And here too, indirectly, had it not been the B-52 bombers flying through the ADIZ air zone, but indirectly US has been involved now. And do you think the problem is going to escalate further, or do you think, because according to the latest advisory, China has said that there is no problem for commercial airplanes or airplanes of any other country to pass through the zone. It's just saying that the zone is ours, but there's no other problem.
If you remember, soon after the INS Airawat incident 3 years ago in South China Sea, China also imposed a similar condition that all the ships which are passing through should take the blessings of China first. So likewise, the Chinese have expanded this perimeter now towards the East China Sea, where they are asking everybody to kowtow to the Chinese overall jurisdiction or overlordship over this region.
Right.
I think this is going to go for some time now, and we will see both sides egging on however, I think that the US policy is also changing. Previously, they had a strategic ambiguity that they will not invoke the alliances with Japan and South Korea on mundane issues. But after this escalation, I think they have sent the B-52 to indicate that the vital US interests are actually affected, rather than just about their allies like Japan and South Korea. So I think what China miscalculated is to kind of provoke the US in this. when the US had suggested, as you mentioned, that this act is a destabilization event, I think it's a very strong vote to suggest that China had crossed those limits.
Right. And also, do you think now that Beijing will back off a little bit? Because a lot of people in the media are talking about a confrontation, a direct confrontation between China and Japan involving, their militaries of both these nations. Do you think something like that is going to happen, or China is going to back off for a bit?
What China did was to move 2 steps forward, and possibly they will have a 1 step backward, but essentially gaining 1 more step in the whole process. So they have notified the global community that they have interest in the East China Sea. They have notified that they are contesting for the US leadership. They have notified that they have come out of the previous era, and now they are looking globally in terms of the leadership position.
So that clearly means more aggressive approach from Xi Jinping after taking over power.
Absolutely. When he mentioned that core interests will not be sacrificed for developmental interests, he is essentially meaning that these issues will also be part of the focus in the coming future.
All right, Dr. Kondapalli, on that note, we'll wrap this up. But thanks so much for joining me and sharing your thoughts with us and telling our viewers essentially what this confrontation is all about and what it might lead up to. Thanks so much once again for joining me on the show. With that, we take a very short break. Lots more in store for you up ahead. A report on the unrest in Thailand, the biggest anti-government protest since deadly political unrest 3 years ago. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying with us. Now, Thailand's embattled Prime Minister easily survived a no-confidence vote in Parliament on Thursday as a wave of simmering protests aimed at bringing down her government entered 5th day. Yingluck came to power in a popular vote 2.5 years ago, but she is now facing a wave of protests by opponents who claim she's a puppet of her brother Thaksin Shinawatra, a former Prime Minister who was ousted in 2006 in a military coup. A report.
Thailand's embattled Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra breezed through a no-confidence vote in Parliament but faced mounting pressure from widening anti-government protests. She pleaded to protesters to call off their sustained anti-government demonstrations and negotiate an end to the nation's latest crisis.
ดิฉันมีความตั้งใจอย่างแท้จริงที่จะให้เกิดความร่วมมือในการหารือเพื่อหาทางออกให้แก่ประเทศขจัดความขัดแย้งทางการเมืองในปัจจุบันที่เรื้อรังต่อเนื่องกันมายาวนานและสร้างความเสียหายให้กับประเทศมามากพอแล้วในการนี้ดิฉันขอเสนอให้ผู้ชุมนุมยุติการชุมนุมคืนสถานที่ราชการเพื่อให้กลไกระบบราชการเดินหน้าต่อไปได้และดิฉันจะเปิดเวทีพูดคุยเพราะรัฐบาลไม่ต้องการการเผชิญหน้า
But the protesters are in no mood to relent. In fact, now they insist that the Prime Minister should resign.
ไม่ชอบเลยคือเขาบริหารประเทศที่แบบว่าไม่มีความเป็นธรรมประชาชนระดับรากหญ้านี่ไม่ได้รับอะไรเลยจากสิ่งที่เขาบอกคือหลอกลวงค่ะหลอกลวงทุกอย่างตั้งแต่ยุคทักษิณมาเลยเป็นต้นมา
Meanwhile, anti-government protesters continued marching to government facilities in Bangkok. Thousands surrounded the National Police headquarters, severing power lines of the facility and calling on the police to side with the protesters. Earlier in the week, demonstrators swarmed finance, foreign and energy ministries, forcing the staff to be evacuated. Similar anti-government crowds were reported at 19 provincial government facilities on Wednesday.
เขาควรจะออกไปนะฮะประชาชนจำนวนมากเป็นล้านๆที่ไม่ชอบเขา
At the center of the protests is a controversial political amnesty bill that people say will enable the ousted ex-Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra to come back to Thailand without serving a jail sentence for corruption. Thaksin Shinawatra was ousted in a military coup in 2006 for alleged corruption.
Iran has agreed to curb some of its nuclear activities for 6 months as part of a landmark nuclear deal reached earlier on this week. But while the deal has been cautiously welcomed in Washington and Tehran, other nations have expressed skepticism. So is the agreement a turning point for Iran's relationship with the West and its neighbors, or will the bumpy road ahead prove too difficult for negotiators to navigate? In what could be the first sign of an emerging rapprochement between the Islamist State and the West, Iran and 6 world powers reached a breakthrough deal early on 24th November to curb Tehran's nuclear program in exchange for limited sanctions relief.
After intensive negotiations, we reached agreement today on a joint plan of action, which sets out an approach towards reaching a long-term, comprehensive solution. We agreed that the process leading to this comprehensive solution will include a first step on initial reciprocal measures to be taken by both sides for a duration of 6 months.
This is only a first step. It's an important achievement, but this is a first step. We need to work together based on the same principles on which we started, principles of equal footing, mutual respect, and common benefit, so that we can put an end to this unnecessary and rather sad chapter.
As part of the deal, Iran has been committed to halting enrichment above 5% and neutralizing its stockpile of near 20% uranium by means of diluting or converting.
به نظر میرسه که در این توافقنامه ایران به حقوق هسته‌ای خودش که غنیسازی هستش تا 5% رو رسیده و این اقرار 6 کشور مهم دنیا بسیار مهم هستش. ایران در این توافقنامه چند پله موقعیت خودش رو در نظام بین الملل و منطقه‌ای ارتقا بخشید.
The agreement aims to buy time to negotiate a comprehensive deal that the Obama administration hopes will lay to rest international concerns about Iran's nuclear program.
For the first time in a decade, we've halted the progress on Iran's nuclear program. Key parts of the program will be rolled back. International inspectors will have unprecedented access to Iran's nuclear-related facilities. So this will help Iran from building a nuclear weapon. And over the coming months, we're going to continue our diplomacy with the goal of achieving a comprehensive solution that deals with the threat of Iran's nuclear program once and for all.
Obama has long been criticized for his desire to engage with U.S. foes. As a presidential candidate in 2008, the former Illinois senator took heat for saying he would talk to Iran, which has not had diplomatic relations with Washington for decades. The agreement suspends US and EU sanctions on some sectors of Iran's economy in the initial 6-month period. And well, much else has been unfolding around the world. Here's a quick wrap of other international news of the week. Pakistan named a career infantry officer credited with rewriting the infantry manual as its new all-powerful army chief, a key position as the country fights a Taliban insurgency and increasing Islamist violence. In a message on Twitter, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif confirmed the appointment of Lieutenant General Raheel Sharif at a time when tension continues with arch-rival India over disputed Kashmir and as the US seeks Pakistan's help in bringing peace to neighboring Afghanistan. German Chancellor Angela Merkel's Conservatives and the centre-left Social Democrats reached a deal on forming a grand coalition after wrangling through the night, meaning she should now be able to form a government by Christmas. 2 months after Merkel's landslide election victory and a month after negotiations began, Germany's two biggest political forces clinched a deal that both sides said they could live with. The US said it would like to see a crucial security deal with Afghanistan signed as quickly as possible to enable US troops to operate in the country beyond next year. Afghan President Hamid Karzai, in a meeting with US National Security Advisor Susan Rice, said he is in no hurry to sign the accord. Karzai has persistently raised questions about the pact. An assembly of Afghan elders endorsed the deal and advised Karzai to sign it promptly. However, the Afghan president said he would not sign it until after a presidential election due in April. The Italian Senate on 27 November expelled centre-right leader Silvio Berlusconi from parliament following his conviction for tax fraud. Berlusconi was sentenced in August to 4 years in prison, commuted to a year under house arrest or in community service for masterminding an illegal scheme to reduce tax bill of his media company Mediaset. At least 20 people were killed and 35 wounded in bombings and shootings in Iraq in a string of attacks that threatened to tilt the country back into an all-out sectarian warfare. 4 suicide bombers targeted a police station in eastern Ramadi, west of Baghdad, killing 4 policemen and wounding 15. Another attacked a police station just north of Ramadi, killing 4 officers and wounding 7. At least 5 people were killed and scores injured across Bangladesh on Wednesday as the second day of a planned nationwide protest against upcoming elections turned violent. Vehicles were set alight by supporters of opposition Bangladesh Nationalist Party. The Election Commission announced that elections would now be held on 5th January. The BNP wanted to postpone the announcement until after an agreement had been reached on the formation of a caretaker cabinet to oversee the election. Shifting gears, time to bring you up to speed with all the sports news that you might have missed through this week. Here's all the sports action.
The Washington Wizards outlasted the Los Angeles Lakers 116-111 at the Verizon Center in Washington, D.C. John Wall had 31 points and 9 assists, and Nene had a career-high 30 points in the victory that ended the Lakers' 3-game winning streak. It was the 3rd straight game that Wall had scored more than 30 points in a game, going 10 for 18 from the field and making 11 of 12 free throws. Ticket sale for the 22nd Winter Olympics opened in Moscow. Ticket sale also started in the Rail Terminal's box office in Sochi, the Black Sea venue of the 2014 Games. According to the organizers, the tickets could be bought until March 16, the final day of Paralympic Games. Ticket prices vary from about $16 for the ice hockey group games and up to over $1,600 for the opening ceremony. Newly crowned World Chess Champion Magnus Carlsen said that Indian Grandmaster and former champion Vishwanathan Anand lost his title because he failed to cope with the pressure during their matches. Carlsen became the new world champion as Game 10 of the Chess Championship ended in a draw in India's southern city of Chennai. Not yet 23, Carlsen led 6-3 before Friday's game and needed just a draw to become the first champion from the West since American Bobby Fischer's reign ended in 1975.
Time now for all the very latest news from the world of movies, music and lifestyle. Have a look at our entertainment wrap.
The Duke of Cambridge, Prince William, entertained guests at a charity event at his Kensington Palace residence by singing alongside US singers Jon Bon Jovi and Taylor Swift. William escorted Swift to the stage to join Bon Jovi in singing the American superstar's 1980s hit, Living on a Prayer. The Royal is a patron of the Centrepoint charity, which is dedicated to helping youth homelessness. Actors Benedict Cumberbatch and singers James Blunt and Tinny Tempah were among the other guests at the event. Pop diva Lady Gaga landed in Japan to promote her latest album Art Pop as she was greeted by over 100 screaming fans gathered at the Narita airport. Lady Gaga's 3rd studio album Art Pop debuted at #1 on the US Billboard 200 album chart on November 20 after 3 months of steady promotion behind singles Applause and Do What You Want. Will Ferrell and the rest of the cast of Anchorman 2 The Legend Continues greeted fans in Sydney at the comedy's Australian premiere. Walking down a burgundy carpet in the honor of the film's main character Ron Burgundy, the sequel reunites Will Ferrell, Steve Carell, Paul Rudd, David Koechner and Christina Applegate as a news team trying to adapt to a 24-hour news channel. Due for public release on December 20, the sequel features cameos by a raft of celebrities, including Kirsten Dunst, Liam Neeson, James Marsden, Nicole Kidman and Kanye West. The Hunger Games Catching Fire blazed straight to the top of weekend movie charts, setting a US and Canadian record for November ticket sales and hauling in a huge $307.7 million around the world. The new film scored 2013's second biggest debut, behind the May opening for superhero sequel Iron Man 3 of $174.1 million and also marked the 4th biggest domestic film opening in history.
That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. See you next week, same time with more international news. Till then, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. This week, I end the show with a sneak peek into the much talked about American Music Awards. This year, country pop star Taylor Swift scored big, taking home 4 wins, including the night's top prize for Artist of the Year, as some of the pop music's biggest names came together for the fan-voted awards ceremony. Enjoy the performances and the backstage moments. This is me, Sana Khan, signing off.
Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift wins Artist of the Year for the 3rd time. She sets a record for the most wins in this category.
Justin Timberlake. Imagine Dragons.
Mark Anthony.
One Direction.
Ariana Grande.
Luke Bryan.
Luke Bryan won his first AMA last year in the same category. Now he picks up the 2nd AMA of his career.